Rarely does a motorcycle become a mega seller without lots of intention and at least some knowledge from the company that they really have something special on their hands. When you push your company to its limits to make the absolute best product in a specific segment, and you know it's the best thing that money can buy, how could you not expect great things from it? But no matter how much work in design and development, no matter how much genius there is behind the project, no matter how good the idea is, there's no way to predict that a motorcycle will change the very landscape of transportation itself and even have cultural and social impacts the way that the Honda Cub did. There are really two seemingly opposite sides to Honda's business when it comes to cars and motorcycles. There's the motorsport side, formed through the late 50s and 60s in Grand Prix racing, primarily through the development of high-revving four-stroke engines. And then on the production side, early on, it was really small, affordable, and utilitarian vehicles. Of course, as time went on, these two worlds would sort of come together, but I think it's important to understand that these worlds, even as early as the 1950s, are more related than one would think. That Honda reliability that they've become known for example, has been developed both on the track and off. If you can make a motorcycle rev past 20,000 RPM, you can definitely make a reliable one that revs to about 7. And it's this ability to excel in every market that they enter that has made Honda Honda. If it were announced today that Honda was going to start making houses, I'd probably get one. But how did Honda create this reputation as a company? Well, for many, it started with the Cub. From the very beginning, Soichiro Honda's goal with his new company was to help serve the need for better mobility, specifically in Japan after the war. There's nothing simpler and cheaper when it comes to getting around than strapping a small engine to a bicycle, so like many of the Japanese manufacturers who were taking a stab at building automobiles, Honda started here. The Cub name was actually born in these early models, with Cub meaning basically cheap urban bike. But most of these motor bicycles coming out of Japan were powered by two-stroke engines, Honda's included, so Soichiro Honda decided to try to make the ultimate motorcycle for this class, literally called the Dream, and in its second iteration, he built it on a four-stroke platform instead of a two-stroke. This would give his little two-wheeler a leg up for those who wanted these machines to basically have less noise, less smoke, and less smell. This original four-stroke version of the Honda Dream started Honda's love affair with the four-stroke engine. At this time, Honda liked to use something called the Hakone Pass to test their motorcycles. If this little bike could traverse this large path, they knew that they would have a winner on their hands. Most vehicles had to stop along the way, but through torrential rain, the little bike chugged along, tackling everything that could be thrown at it, even overtaking the Buick that Honda was riding in. Now, this four-stroke version of the Honda Dream would really be a breakout success for Honda. Produced from 51 through 53, some 36,150cc Honda Dream E-Types would go out of the Honda factory, and in many ways, the E-Type Dream would really be the building blocks, not only for the iconic Dream models to come later in the 60s, and really all production Honda four-strokes, but primarily for the Cub to come, because of this new, reliable, but simple and brilliant little four-stroke engine. But Honda wanted to take this a step further. Sometimes the best way to build a great product is to get out and see what's out there. The birth of the Super Cub really came from a trip abroad for Mr. Honda and his co-founder, Takeo Fujisawa. This would also be the birth of Honda's racing ventures, but that's another story that I've told many times. Honda and Fujisawa went to Europe to visit manufacturers like Puch and NSU and Zundap, as well as even Lambretta. They also got a sense for what the market was like overseas and what people were pretty much riding. What they saw was a need for more sophistication in the small two-wheeled market. Something that Honda would become known for even through the 60s is taking small class motorcycles and just kind of upping everything a bit. They realized that though the average buyer of a 50 or 100cc motorcycle was quite different from those buying larger, more performance-oriented machines, many of the things that make larger motorcycles great could be brought to the small bike market. And so Honda knew that making just another scooter wasn't the answer. The goal for the new four-stroke Cub would really be an entirely new kind of vehicle, one that could fill a gap in the average person's life, with most people moving from bicycles to scooters to then cars. The new Cub could be, for many people, their first choice over a car, depending on what they needed out of their vehicle. Obviously, a family of 4 can't just all pack onto a Honda Cub, but there are a lot of people in the world who aren't in that place, and this is a great option for them. With influences across the spectrum of two-wheeled vehicles, from the Vespa to, larger 4-stroke bikes, the Cub would be something different. Honda's primary goal with the new Cub would be a motorcycle that met the needs of real people. This would influence the overall design at every level, but at the heart of the bike, Honda knew what had to be done. This new bike needed to be powered by a very small displacement 4-stroke, not a 2-stroke. Now today, the idea of a 50cc 4-stroke engine seems pretty simple, but you can thank Honda for that, dating all the way back to this bike into the 50s, because at this time, this really wasn't a simple task. There's a reason virtually all small displacement engines, even today, but especially in the 50s, were 2-strokes. If everything is going to be tiny, simpler is better, and if you've ever dug into a 2-stroke engine, there's nothing simpler. But Honda knew that the average person riding scooters and motorized bicycles, if they got the chance, they would love a 4-stroke. They just got to experience it. Honda tasked Daiji Hoshino the job of team leader for this new model, and he began working tirelessly to design a setup for this 50cc 4-stroke engine. One of the key elements of the Cub would be a new level of reliability and usability in terms of maintenance. If the Cub would be a world beater, it would need to be the kind of machine that could be easily maintained in places where complicated tools aren't available, but also the engine really needed to be able to withstand the elements so that hopefully there'd be almost no maintenance. What is it about this little 4-stroke engine that made it so good and so indestructible? As I'm sure you well know, Honda didn't invent the 4-stroke. American and British motorcycle manufacturers and car manufacturers had been developing 4-stroke technology since the turn of the century. But never has a small 4-stroke engine been made to be such a workhorse up to this point as the little 50cc single that would go in the Cub and then go in lots of other motorcycles. At its core, it's simply an overhead valve pushrod engine, just in amazingly small form. But the details are really what's interesting. First, they decided to give the engine incredibly low compression, making the engine able to run on fuel of virtually any quality. In that sense, it was kind of an old world engine, not unlike a Ford Model T or Model A. But those low compression engines aren't exactly known for being powerful. For the Cub, they were able to give it a power boost despite having such low compression by using large valves. With the engine installed horizontally, cooling was a bit of a problem, so they decided to drill holes in the cylinder head for better cooling, but this lowered the total surface area of the head itself, giving them less room for those larger valves that they were hoping to utilize. So they decided to go with 10mm spark plugs instead of 12mm, with NGK vowing to produce them, and in the end the engine made about twice as much power as other 50cc options in the market. Little did Honda know, this tiny little 4-stroke would become a major part of their business for really their entire future going forward. But in the end, it is a very simple engine. What makes these engines so reliable isn't necessarily the engines themselves or, their form. It's more just Honda's willingness to test these kinds of things at great length and their willingness to make small adjustments to make their engines reliable. And we would see this going forward. Through the 50s and through the 60s and 70s, nobody would test and sort of strain their engines to the level that Honda would to make sure that they were completely reliable. Aside from the engine itself, the other key factor for usability was the way that the bike shifted. The Vespa, a very similar machine with a similar purpose to the Cub, had tackled this by putting the clutch lever and the shifter in one place, at the handlebars. But for the Cub, Honda took a big step forward, taking away the need for a manual clutch altogether and instead utilizing the centrifugal clutch from the D-Type Dream. One of the main reasons for this setup was to make it possible for delivery riders, people who need potentially to balance things in one hand, to still be able to ride with the other hand. You can ride a Cub with one hand. Little did they know how important the development of this specific type of clutch would be for their entire range of small displacement bikes going forward, to not just serve the purpose of, a delivery rider who wants to ride with one hand, but really to bring in new and young riders who don't have to worry so much about dealing with the clutch when they get on their first motorcycle. Now, in terms of the design, the Cub may look slightly like a scooter, and of course, the influence of bikes like the Vespa are obvious, especially with its monocoque frame, with the gas tank under the seat giving the rider the ability to step through instead of over the bike. And again, like the Vespa, Honda was concerned with all sorts of people being able to ride it, not just people who wear pants, but the Cub is really its own thing. In contrast to typical scooters, Honda decided to go with much larger wheels. Getting a company to develop tires for the Cub was a challenge in and of itself, as they're sort of in between proper motorcycle tires and small scooter wheels, but this feature made the Cub a certain winner for countries with less developed roads. It's kind of like a souped up scooter really, with more power and better capability. One of the key differentiating features of the Cub versus all of its competition was the use of plastic instead of metals. From the fenders to even the fairings, it was all plastic, polyethylene to be exact. And the Cub was actually the first motorcycle ever to use a plastic fairing. So this was quite forward stuff. Unlike most scooters at the time, the engine and gearbox weren't fixed to the rear axle, giving the bike lower unsprung weight and better cooling, and in the end kind of making it feel a little more like a motorcycle. The end product was a perfectly balanced, capable little motorcycle that was easier to use than all other motorcycles, but more capable than all scooters. The perfect all-around vehicle for people entirely uninterested in two-wheeled transportation because it answered most of their hesitations. Smelly? Nah. Lots of maintenance? Mind you, this is the 1950s. Everything on the road called for maintenance. Nope, not the little Cub, virtually maintenance-free thanks to sound mechanics and reliable electrics. Is it loud? Nope. Difficult to handle? Heavy? Nope, none of those things. Capable of keeping up with traffic? Absolutely. And with over 200 miles per gallon and a base price of roughly $250 here in the US and 55,000 yen in Japan, both of those numbers are the equivalent of roughly 2,500 US dollars today. This was a new kind of cheap transportation, so that made it a no-brainer. But see, the work wasn't over. When you have a product like this, you have to figure out how to get the word out. And for Honda to break into the US market in a new way, they'd have to do something special. Often today, when we see really effective marketing, it's usually coupled with a product that doesn't actually live up. And I hate this. So many companies are pretty much just marketing companies who do happen to have a product, and that product isn't really the point, it's the marketing that's the point. But that's never been the case with Honda, and that's why Honda is such a legendary company, and it certainly wouldn't be the case with their first big promotion. On top of the fact that they had just built one of the most innovative, important, and useful vehicles of all time, shortly after its release, Honda decided to couple their fantastic product with arguably the greatest advertising campaign in automotive history. The You Meet the Nicest People campaign goes beyond just selling motorcycles. Honda was trying to change the very landscape of how society views two-wheeled transportation. With the Cub at the center of it all, a new kind of motorcycle for new and different motorcyclists. The campaign was aimed to really challenge the prevailing image of what a motorcyclist was. Led by gray advertising, the central idea of the campaign was to portray Honda riders as approachable, friendly individuals, shattering stereotypes and inviting a new demographic to embrace the brand and to embrace the two-wheeled life. The campaign's visual centerpiece was a series of vibrant and relatable images that conveyed a sense of community and camaraderie among Honda riders. Through television commercials and print advertisements and promotional materials, the viewer was introduced to diverse characters from all walks of life, united by their shared love for Honda motorcycles. And these ads would often show riders doing everyday activities from commuting to work, to enjoying picnics, to hanging out with friends. All of it was just very warm and approachable. The ad's slogan, "You Meet the Nicest People on a Honda," became synonymous with the idea that Honda motorcycles were not just vehicles, but they were vehicles that connected people in meaningful ways. And this is something all motorcyclists talk about today. But this idea really started in the 1960s with this Honda ad. Aside from starting Honda's reign as the premier global motorcycle manufacturer, the impact of this advertising campaign was really profound. It shifted the perception of motorcycles from symbols of rebellion to vehicles that just fostered community and positive interactions. A far cry from The Wild One, a movie that showed the entirely opposite side of riding. This transformation was instrumental in broadening the appeal of motorcycling beyond the stereotypical biker image, attracting a more diverse and family-oriented customer base. In regards to the Cub, the campaign played a pivotal role in solidifying Honda's position in the American motorcycle market. But beyond that, the campaign influenced the larger cultural landscape by reflecting and reinforcing the changing values of this era. As the United States grappled with civil rights movements, anti-war protests, and really a youth-driven counterculture, Honda's portrayal of inclusivity and harmony on the open road served as a reflection of the desire for unity and connection. The ad campaign's positive messaging and portrayal of diverse riders helped to counteract some of the divisive narratives at the time. Now, these messages didn't necessarily resonate with those who were already diehard riders. I mean, I love that part where Jay Leno says, you meet the nicest people on a Honda, and he was just kind of like, I just want to ride. I'm not really that concerned with meeting people right now. But there is no denying that this advertising campaign really did bring in tons of new people to motorcycles, and it's pretty hard to have a problem with that. The You Meet the Nicest People campaign's legacy really endures to this day. It marked a turning point in advertising strategy, demonstrating the power of shifting perceptions and appealing to emotions. This approach has influenced all sorts of other marketing campaigns across industries. Additionally, the campaign contributed to shaping Honda's enduring reputation for quality and reliability, attributes that today continue to be associated with the brand. Honda really bet everything on the new Cub, making connections with dealers across the US, building a new plant dedicated to Cub production. By the end of the 1960s, and thanks to constant improvements, around 7 million Cubs had been produced. Today, over 100 million Super Cubs have come out of Honda's factories, making it the single most sold vehicle ever. But in all reality, that's just a fraction of the total number of small displacement two-wheelers that were pretty much the offspring of the Cub, or even the same thing as the Cub with just small differences, from the little mini bikes and trail bikes of the 70s onward to even the current 125cc offerings. They're all just grandchildren of the Cub with their small, air-cooled, horizontally mounted singles, and many of these bikes are still using its innovative semi-automatic clutch. The Honda Cub's influence goes beyond Honda itself and even beyond motorcycles in general, but I think in looking at Honda's history specifically, for me the most interesting factor is how the Cub influenced Honda's business model going forward. This was really the first time that Honda really stepped out and bet big on a product. They took in all the information they could on a specific market and made an all-new machine catered to that market. And what the Cub did was prove that Honda as a company might be the best in the world when it comes to seeing a need and filling that need with a perfect but all new and different product. From mini bikes to lawnmowers to cars to taking on the best of the best in larger performance motorcycles, the Cub gave Mr. Honda the confidence necessary to expand their business into virtually every segment of the automotive world. You and I trust companies like Honda to make, for example, a van that will get my family around without problems, but the reason we trust Honda is that Honda trusted itself and continues to. The development of the Cub would really be the beginning of this for the company. For example, it would have been easier to just do 12mm spark plugs. Well, Honda was like, we need 10mm spark plugs. Oh, this machine will call for entirely new tires that don't exist? Oh wait, none of the tire companies will make all new tires for specific models, which is hilarious that they had this policy at this time. Well, it better get to work because we're going to sell 30,000 Cubs a month, and it's going to have 17-inch tires. They really learned to stick to their guns and put in the hard work that it takes to really make the best vehicles in the world. This kind of relentless belief in the company would really be the core of Honda's business model going forward. It would lead them to be willing to invest millions and often years of time into specific models. Yes, sometimes those models would flop, but most of the time they would be massive sellers. And in this sense, as different as they may be in form, a bike like the Honda Goldwing owes quite a lot to the Cub. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this history of the Honda Cub. I'm sure loads of you have ridden Cubs or owned Cubs in the past, and I'd love to hear your stories, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Ride safe.